photos were taken with that lens, and I will share with you in just a second how I got those photos, exactly the behind the scenes. But I gotta share with you that Viltrox actually reached out and wanted to sponsor a video. They're like, can you try and play with this lens, that 35mm f1.2? And I was like, at first I was like a little bit hesitant, but knowing that I have some of you viewers that love these lenses, I was like, let's try it, let's give it a go. And I want to share my experience, but also I want to share how I shot with it on the field. So the first thing I think is pretty cool is that this lens has a little bit of a screen there, and a very fun thing about it is that you can customize that little screen that's on top. And I just wrote good morning just to add a little bit of smile every time I turn on this camera, and I'm like, let's go shoot. This lens is priced less than $1,000. At first I was like, f1.2 35? I remember the love I have for the 50mm f1.2, and so I got curious about how this would do. And honestly, I've taken some shots I absolutely love right now. So this lens is about 920 grams, and if you remember, one of my favorite lenses all these years has been a 50mm 1.2. So I was extremely curious to see how that would compare with the 35mm 1.2. I've never tried any of these lenses, and I gotta say, the surprise is real. I absolutely love the effect in shooting at f1.2 with some of those photos, and it's something that I didn't expect to be able to do for such a low price. I will put it out there, because if you compare that 35mm 1.2 is $999 USD. If you compare it, the Sony 35-1.4 is $1,398, and the Sony 50mm f1.2 is basically $2,000. So this is half the price for f1.2 lens in 35mm, which sounds pretty cool, right? It's actually even cheaper than 35-1.4 from Sony. And we have very similar designs, meaning we have an aperture ring right here that allows you to set it to click or just smooth if you're doing video. We have two function buttons right there, the function 1, function 2, that you can program however you want using the Viltrox app and obviously in your camera body. I personally always use it to focus straight on eyes and look for eyes in a photo. It's something I talk about in another video about autofocus. And we have the AM/MF switch. That little screen is actually giving you information as to what distance you can be focusing at, right? Instead of having the marking on the lens, it actually shows it to you here when you're in manual focus, 0.5, and the minimum focusing distance is 0.34 meter. We'll talk about the AF, the low light, and the bokeh in a second, but knowing me and knowing how I shoot usually, and I'm in heavy conditions, there was a very good surprise, even for the price, is the fact that it is weather sealed. So you actually can see that little ring here protecting water from entering into the lens. Now, being on the field, one of the quality of that lens is that ability to separate your subject from the background super easily. At f1.2, it just shines through. You can do portraits. You can really get a subject, even in a busy background, to stand out. Before we go any further, thank you so much for being here. My name is Pierre Tinab, and I'm a travel adventure photographer, and I've been sharing tutorials and photography adventures on this channel for years, and there is way more to come, so make sure you subscribe. I'm so happy for you to be part of this community, and know that every single photo that you see has been taken by me and has been edited with my Lightroom presets that I created and I use every day. They're linked in the description if you want to use them also. They will not only help you edit your photos fast and get a cool style, but also they will support the channel and my work. So thank you so much, and let's get back to this lens and that experience on the field. Hey, look at this, guys. Another cool street. A lot of waiting today. Here I'm gonna shoot at f8 in order to get the lens flare. Oh, I like this. And you can see I'm clearly excited because I've been waiting a long time for that shot actually. You can really see how the lens behave and what lens flare you're getting at f8 with this shot. Bending over, we've got the sun ray, we've got the tower, everything's perfectly aligned. Oh, I love it. Okay, 4-star. Okay, now I don't know if you see, but there is a taxi that's parked like this and it's coming out of the road a little bit. I thought it could make a good frame. And when I'm looking at it, the lady walking also could be a really nice frame. So I'm getting really low right now, and I'm actually going to take that shot from the other side because the light conditions were a little better and the action looked better, the rest of the street. So I got it. And here I'm shooting at f1.2 because I really wanted that taxi to pop out. And you can see, and that's something I love with 35, it still feels like it's not too tight, that you can get the environment, but when you're like that shallow, you really make things pop person walking in the light. Ray of light. Yeah, here I'm waiting for the exact moment where he's well placed, so he really pops out in that photo on the lighter background. And this is always a good test. What I'm doing with the flowers is the test for the bokeh to see how it falls out around, and I always do that. I really love to look at the bokeh like that. Like take a close-up shot of something and have something a little bit consistent in the background. Now, this was one of my favorite moments because there's this guy that's reading a newspaper just in the background, and I'm going to be using that foreground to frame him a little bit, and I'm going to shoot at a very shallow depth of field in order to have that little tree just be basically a foreground, but without knowing what it is exactly. And as you can tell, he pops out, right? But then I realize also, I think the composition that may be even more interesting, maybe like completely facing him on the side. So I'm going to try one last shot here, but really I want to be facing him forward and get that clean composition with just the wall in the background. And I cropped in a little bit after. Here, there is a guard that is actually inside this door. You probably can't see it too well, but I'm cropping it at 50mm just at the back of the camera to get that one and really reframe it to have him stand out. Now we're getting to a very busy area where there's lots of shops and restaurants, so I'm actually getting close to the action, which is something you can do with the 35 easily, physically, and just trying to get a little bit of the kitchen action, and then I'm moving backwards in order to get a different angle. And that's something I love at 35 is you can actually get pretty close, get a little bit of that action, and also get the environmental shot that is wider. And if you notice, earlier I used the carton boxes kind of to frame that, and I kind of want to isolate that shop from what is around. So I'm going to wait until there's no person around, and I'm going to crop that little shop you see with the blue light on the left. I'm going to make sure it doesn't enter too much the composition, and I may have to crop in a tiny bit after in post, but it's something I wanted just that shop in this photo. Now, another really cool spot with a lot of neon lights, but the problem is the bottom of that shop has a restaurant, which you can see here on those photos, and it doesn't necessarily look the most pleasing, so I change angle and I use the filter to get those reflections, and you can see how it changes a little bit from having a little bit of the restaurant and not having it at all. Let me know if you have a preference between the two. And now, also one of my favorite shots probably, I'm actually waiting for people to pass by, and I'm playing with the filter to get a little bit of that reflection. It's nighttime, so I'm shooting very wide open, but I'm making sure that my subject walking through the frame is blurry because it adds motion and it adds a cool effect in my opinion. The autofocus has been really responsive on all those shots you've seen. Now I'm testing on a little session with portraits with Miku, our model, and what was great is that again I'm using the button on the side to focus just on the eyes, and you can see at f1.2 it actually nails it really well. And the last shoot is in the middle of the night. We're having that neon light lighting up Miku, and here I'm actually switching to manual focus because if you can look, it allows me to really get the iris sharp in those conditions that are very difficult and keep it consistent while I'm shooting. And I'm shooting at 3.5, f3.5 to get a little more context, and f1.2 here. And later we switched and I shot a few more at 1.2. So you may be wondering while I'm taking the photo, how's the autofocus? It actually felt great. It was fast, responsive, and didn't hunt. And most importantly, at f1.2, you want it to be very precise, which I found out to be. If you zoom into the eyes are tack sharp and everything falls out very nicely, which is where we should be talking about the bokeh a little bit. That bokeh is smooth and delicious. I love talking about bokeh like it's ice cream, honestly. The Viltrox ultra large aperture and precision aspherical lens, which was basically designed to minimize that bokeh onion ring effect and give you something that is precise and yet very enjoyable to the eye. And I find that yes, it is definitely enjoyable to the eye. So to me, this would be the perfect lens if you're trying to get into portraits, if you love to do portraits and you want to take it a step further. 35mm environmental portrait, f1.2, you can really make that background creamy and get that subject to pop. Last thing you may want to know is that the diameter for the filter is 77. So if you already have some of these, you're going to be able to use them, maybe add a black mist or polarizing filter for added effects. Now, let me know what you think in the comments. Have you used these lenses? Do you like them? Do you think it's a good competitor for Tamron, Sigma, and also the Sony lenses? I'm kind of curious to shoot more with it and use it. It's been a pleasure to know that you can go down to f1.2, but does everything need to be 1.2? It's a good question. Now, if you're curious about the camera settings I use the most on the field, make sure you grab my free photography cheat sheet that's linked in the description. And if you want to learn more about how to master your autofocus, watch this video. And to know if you're making the 3 biggest photography mistakes, watch this video. Now get out there, go shoot, try something different, try something new. I'll see you in the next one.